Hi everybody, welcome to our fourth Tech Under 20 Cup workshop of creating a business plan. Thank you again for listening in. We're excited to have only 10 days left until the Tech Under 20 Cup, so we'd like to give you some more tips on how to succeed with this workshop. So to begin, we'll be going over a couple key items. The first, we'll just quickly go over some announcements we've discussed in the past. After, we'll go over sort of the key reasons of why you want a business plan. And afterwards, we'll go over some of the key parts of a plan that we're using for the Tech Under 20 Cup. All right, so let's go through the announcements. So there's only 10 days left until the Cup, so things are coming up really quickly. So make sure that you're working hard right now, you're preparing for it because there's a lot of stuff to do. The videos are going to be due soon, so February 23rd, and the business plans are due February 28th. And if you haven't heard on Discord, we have two prizes now. So we have the grand prize of $15,000, and we've also added a $7,500 prize. So the cup will start at 9:30 on March 2nd. So make sure you're there on time. And the cup will go on for the rest of the day. And we've opened up the finals for family and friends. So from 2:30 till 4 o'clock, we'll have the final 6 pitches. So please invite your family and friends. They can get a ticket on Eventbrite so they can attend that event. So the fundamental question, why bother with a business plan? So a business plan should have a reason to exist, and typically it's a really long document that companies use as a complement to their slide deck when pitching to venture capitalists or doing pitches internally for within their company. But in our context, we really want to focus in on a shorter version of the business plan. So for the Tech Under 20 Cup, your business plan should boil down to two main aspects. So the first is, why does your project exist? And the second is, why will your project work? And if you can answer these questions within your business plan, you will do very well, because these are sort of the two key parts. What is the opportunity that exists for your business or for your project? And then how will you best make use of this opportunity? So to break down the first question of why does your project exist, this is a hard question to answer, but typically you can answer it in sort of three sub-questions. The first is, what is the large problem you are solving? The second, what specific problem are you solving? And the third, what is the growth opportunity? So the first question of what is the large problem you are solving basically talks about the larger issues that your project connects to. So the example we've been using is food insecurity, and that's a massive problem, whether you think about it at a global scope, so world hunger or lack of access to nutritious food, and more of a local problem. So why do we have so many people using food banks within our community? So the idea here is that you want to show that the problem you are solving is large enough and meaty enough that it's worth solving, right? So if your problem only affects 10 people at the end of the day, right, you're solving a problem, but we want to see something that's bigger and more impactful, right? So most of the problems outlined in the youth report by the Oakville Community Foundation are big and meaty issues that affect not just the local community, but the national and international community as well. So that's the first thing, is that what is this large problem that you are solving? The second is the specific problem that you're solving. So it's all great to want to solve something like world hunger, but you can't just solve world hunger, right? You need to solve something specific about it first and validate that what you're solving there actually works. So in the context of, for example, helping students get healthy food, this is a more specific problem that relates to world hunger and food insecurity in general, but it's much more smaller and feasible to actually solve. So even in that case, when you help students get healthier food options, you want to narrow the problem down even further, right? So we've been talking about talking to customers, prototyping, and you've hopefully noticed that you can't just solve a massive problem, right? You want to be very specific with your solution and connect it back to the larger problem. So that's really important, is solve a specific problem, make sure that that specific problem is important and fits in well with the greater picture. And the final thing is, what is the growth opportunity? So basically this is asking, how do you get from your specific problem to your large problem? And this is what you want to highlight, is saying if you're helping students get food in a healthy manner after school, then how does this connect to the larger problem of food insecurity or obesity or unhealthy living, right? So you want to highlight what the next steps are and how your project can grow and expand in a sustainable fashion. So based on the questions I just asked, here are some examples of ways to answer them, right? So these are just an example. Within your business plan, you want to be a little bit more thorough than this, but you should be able to summarize the answers to the questions quite concisely. So the first question of what is the bigger problem you are solving? So the bigger problem is making healthier food accessible. So here you could expand by talking about the public health epidemic of obesity, about how cheaper food is typically unhealthier, and how this provides an issue in terms of convenience, about how the easiest way to get calories into your body is by eating some junk food rather than having healthier options, right? Also about habits and nutrition. So you can give a brief about why this is an important problem. You don't need to spend your whole business plan explaining to us why obesity is an issue. You can take that as a fairly straightforward assumption. But just explain the magnitude of the problem and why this is important. Okay. So the second part is, what is the specific smaller problem you are tackling? So in this case, the example we give is helping students choose healthier after-school snacks. So this is still a large problem, right? Because we have millions of students in Canada, and most of them, when they come home from school, are hungry, given that they've been either running around or studying all day. So the question is, how do we help students refuel healthily, right? And this problem can be even more specific by being made about a specific age group, right? So the eating patterns of a 5-year-old versus grade 5 versus grade 12 student are going to be very different. Likewise, their accessibility to technology, their peer pressure, their regards to their parents. So even this can be made to be much more specific because your solution should be specific and effective. So the final thing is, what is your growth opportunity? So here we highlight the growth opportunity going from students at school to employment wellness programs. So we say that after we've addressed the problem at the student level, we're looking to address this problem at the employee wellness level, right? And this is sort of a secondary market that you can choose to unlock. And for the case of the project, you don't necessarily have to think that big, right? So because there are millions of students, you can say, first we're going to solve this for grade 1s and 2s because they have specific needs and specific challenges that they face. For example, integrating into a school environment where peer pressure to eat different things is much more low-key and impactful. And then we're going to expand into the grade 3-4 market, for example. So that's also a very valid strategy, but at the end of the day, you want to show that your project just doesn't end where it is now, but how it grows into the future. So this is something important to consider. So now on the flip side, so we talked about the problems. So we talked about world food insecurity, obesity, unhealthy eating. We talked about how your project is going to fix a small subset and how it can grow to solve a larger problem, whether within the student space or within the employee wellness space. So the question is now, why will your project work? And likewise to the first question, we want to answer it with smaller questions. So the first question that you want to ask yourself, and this is what you want to tell your judges, is why does your product solve the problem? Right? So you've highlighted this problem, the big problem, the specific problem. You want to explain to us why does it solve it? Because at the end of the day, no matter how fancy your product is, no matter how many custom animations you have, no matter how powerful your product is, if it doesn't solve the problem, it doesn't matter, right? So this is something important to consider. So at the end of the day, why does your product solve this problem? The second question about why would your users use this product is also very important because you want to convince the judges that you have done some interaction with customers, you have, in the ideal case, some people already using your product, and you want to say, okay, we're solving this problem and users are going to continue using this product for a number of reasons, right? So this can be from an acquisition perspective. So why would somebody new sign up for your product? Say, why would a new parent look at this app that helps their kid eat healthier after school and say, yeah, I want to sign up for that, right? The second reason, the second part of this question is, why would somebody continue using your product? So for example, if a parent signs up for the app and they use it for a month and they get their kid following a habit, what's stopping them from just uninstalling and either going to competitor or just stop using it overall, right? So why do users keep using your product? And at the end of the day, if you are confident that if users stop using your product, that's okay. For example, you've helped establish positive benefits for families, right? And they uninstall the app, you can say that that's actually a success metric, that people are uninstalling the app because they don't need it anymore. And this is a sign that you've solved a small societal problem, right? So this can be actually be a positive if users stop using your product. But again, you have to think it through. You have to think of it from the user's perspective because those are the people you're trying to help. The final question is, how will you fund your project? So this is a challenge, but you need to think about this because in the ideal world, if you're doing some social good, things should just come together and your project will continue to be built. But this is a challenge, and no matter how you're choosing to actually create your product, it should be financially sustainable. So saying that your product will be funded by donations is okay or by volunteers, but you have to explain why would people donate to it and why would people volunteer. So this is the place where you have to be careful because you can't just wave your hands and say, we're going to get donations from the government or from companies and create it. Likewise, you can't say, oh, we're going to charge people this many dollars a month and they're going to pay to use it, right? So you have to explain clearly why people would pay you to use this product or to sustain this product. And also, from a growth perspective, why is it sustainable? So if you're spending $10 per user on acquisition through marketing or other campaigns, but you only are going to get $5 worth of value from that user, right? That's not a sustainable growth model because the money you're spending to acquire new users is higher than the, the value that you're going to be getting from them over the lifetime of your product. So this is important to consider. And again, don't be hand wavy. You need to clearly explain sort of the value that your project provides and how you capture it. Okay, so going back to our example of our afternoon snack app. So here's the answer to the first question that we've come up with as an example. So the reason that this product solves the problem is that students come home tired and they have no time to think. So this barrier of not thinking too much leads them to choosing a snack that's unhealthy or is the easiest thing on hand. So they grab a cookie, a bag of chips, etc. So by removing the need to think, you allow them to make healthier choices. So that's how you solve this problem of students eating unhealthily. So it should be quick to articulate, it should be easy to understand, it should be super simple. The next question is, uh, why are you actually going to have users that use the product? So if nobody actually cares about eating healthy, this makes no sense, right? But you can make the argument that the new generation is more health conscious, and parents and schools are also supportive. But the challenge for people sometimes is how do you start to actually implement these patterns in a healthy way? So you can share some of the research you've done and say, look, we've surveyed 50 students, we've talked to their parents, we've talked to their teachers, and we're looking at a demographic that is largely supportive of this initiative. So here you've communicated why users would use it, right? And here you can also comment on how you're actually going to get growth. So you can say, we're going to get, for example, 10 students at first to start using the app, and because they like sharing their experiences on social media, this might be a growth engine to get their friends to sign up as well. And you have this healthy eating movement that is simple and relatable to students. And then the third part is, how are you going to make this sustainable? So sustainability is hard. This is what sinks a lot of businesses because they run out of money or they can't generate enough growth. So we don't expect you to come up with a brand new business model that revolutionizes the world, but you need to choose a business model or a donation model or whatever you're using for sustainability as something that can potentially work. So you can say that the way you're going to finance this and sort of sustain the growth is that you're going to have an e-commerce perspective where you're going to make suggestions for recipes, and then students just can press order for next week's recipes or for current recipes to get a restock of the ingredients they need. So for example, if they're a fan of peanut butter and celery, right, they can reorder it, and you as a company or as an app will get a percentage of that value to sustain your product. So again, that business model may or may not work, but it's plausible. And if you suggest why people would use it by tying it back to the original three things, this is important. So at the end of the day, after you submit your business plan, which is 2 pages long, readers should be excited. Right? So they should read through this and be like, wow, this is a very interesting project. It's solving a very interesting problem, and I think it can work. So that's important. You want to generate interest. And the thing here is that you don't want to bore your audience, right? You want to make it interesting and exciting to read. Business plans are often very dry, but because we're giving you a 2 page limit, we hope that you'll be able to communicate your points effectively because you're forced to do so. You don't have 10 pages to ramble on. So now that people are excited about your business plan, let's think about some things you should remember. So the first is that your business plan should be customer focused. So in this case, you want to describe why customers are going to be using your product, that you've thought about who they are, why they will actually keep using it. So these are things that are really important. And I mentioned it before in the answers to the questions about what is your problem and why your project will work, but this is something I want to emphasize again. You want to explain who your customers are, why your problem will be solved. And I'm repeating this because oftentimes, as a student, you're not taught to think from a customer perspective. You're taught to think from a perspective of here are the requirements, how do I solve them? And it's really focused on your own ability. But here you have to acknowledge that while you have great ideas, you need to validate that this is something that somebody will use. The second key thing to remember is that you need to make sure that your idea is sustainable and you communicate this in your business plan. So this is something that the judges will ask is, how will your project live on after the cup? So sustainability means financial sustainability. It means explaining how you'll have the money or the time to support this kind of effort. So these are things that explain why your project will continue to live on and why people will continue to use it. So in the case of the projects we mentioned before, you need to explain what factors from your business model or your prototype are going to drive engagement and positive outcomes as a result of what you've built and designed. The third thing is focusing on key details. So key details are things you really should care about in your report, rather than adding in details that aren't going to advance your objective of your project. So to give an example, you can spend 2 pages explaining to us why obesity is harmful and how it's caused. And unless these things are very specific to what you're building, they're not going to be particularly relevant. So rather than going through 3 pages of background information telling us about why obesity is caused, the statistics about it, make it a 1-sentence intro saying that, for example, within Canada we have an obesity rate that's around 25%. It's around this percentage for students, and it's caused by a lack of physical activity, harmful eating patterns in some cases, and in others just a social overabundance of food. So within 1 sentence, you explain some of the key reasons and the problems that exist within the space. Going deeper into that isn't particularly important unless you're solving a key aspect of that. So if you're focusing on healthy living, you can bring up some information about that. So say you want to talk about getting people to exercise more. In that case, you can bring up more details of how many people are exercising, how much, right? You can talk about forms of exercises. But again, those details are very specific to your solution, the problem you're solving. So make sure you focus on that. Likewise, step back and read your report and say, what are some questions that the judges are going to be asking? Are they going to be asking more about obesity? Are they going to be asking more about the technology you used in your presentation or in your product? Or are they going to be asking things about sustainability, about customers, about how your product will continue to live on, right? So think about the key questions that will actually determine whether or not your project would succeed or fail, and try to incorporate details onto that to explain those relationships. The final thing is that you want to be articulate. So you have 2 pages, around 500 words, to actually explain what you're doing. And within this limit, you have no need to add buzzwords, you have no need to be fluffy, you want to get to the point and answer the questions. So many of you will find it difficult to do so, but that's part of the fun. You'll have to answer a variety of questions and have a number of sections that are quite succinct and easy to read. So these are things that are really important to remember. So the next question is, after reading your plan, will you give yourself $15,000? So after reading the plan, this should be a solid marketing document that says, hey, I'm selling a product and a solution to the community, and are you confident enough that you're going to give me $15,000 to implement this? And if you've read over your business plan and you can answer yes confidently, that means that you've done a good job. And even better, if somebody else can read over your plan, whether it's another group member or another member of the community, and can say yes as well, this is a very encouraging sign. But what's important to remember is that the scale of the project that you're building. So you're building a project, and it's quite important to realize that it probably won't become a billion-dollar company. And while you might have dreams that grow to that size, for the sake of this project and for the sake of the business plan, you don't need to project that every month you're going to triple the number of customers you have. Growing slowly and steadily is completely reasonable, and given your situation as students, this is something that you should expect. For example, within Tech Under 20, when we add new chapters to the mix, we're not looking to double the number of chapters every month. That would be unsustainable and frankly, I don't think possible. But instead, if every month we can add a new chapter every couple of months, this is sustained growth that is very beneficial. On top of that, when companies grow too quickly, they run into a number of challenges. And a number of times, these are actually being responsible companies. So by growing too quickly, you get issues sometimes with ethics and decision making. So You don't need to wow us with fancy projections of how you're going to become a $100 million company in a year. Focus on solving the problem at hand and explaining how you can grow reasonably in the future. The next thing is that at the end of the day, you'll have key stakeholders to making your project a success. So don't forget them. Whether these are students, teachers, parents, members of the community, suppliers, whoever they are, make sure that your business plan touches upon them if they are truly important. Going back to the e-commerce of healthy snacks delivery app, think about the key members you have. If you require buy-in from grocery stores, again, make sure that they're in your business plan. At least mention somewhere as some detail, because if they're not really a key stakeholder. You need to communicate how you're going to work with these key stakeholders or acquire them. So all these things are very, very important. So this wraps up this workshop. It's not a live workshop, so can't answer your questions on air, but feel free to post your questions within the Discord channel, and I'll get back to you within a couple of hours. So with that, we'd like to thank you for listening in on this presentation and hope you have a great day.